With all the ways there is to make money from property, property development and new builds, building out the ground is often seen as the one that makes the most amount of money. And in this video, I want to share with you the 5 stages you need to understand to do this successfully. If you're here for the first time, my name is Hussain, and on this channel I have 3 videos a week to help you in your property investing journey. I've been investing for about 15 years in property and very recently completed my first new build project. This was building houses out of the ground, quite an experience, and we've got a number of videos on that. In fact, we'll link them in the description below. And let's first talk about what is property development. Property development I see as building new property out of the ground or converting existing buildings, say like a warehouse, and turning into apartments. That's essentially property development. But hey, look, there's no dictionary term for these. These are just what we perceive or what we understand as these terms. And sometimes people talk about flipping property, which is buy, renovating and selling, and they refer to that as property development. I see property development as really creating brand new homes as opposed to converting existing ones. If you are interested in flipping, we'll also do a video, link a video below for you on that in the description to watch that as well. If you're enjoying this content, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can regularly see the videos that we do, and if you enable the notification bell, you'll get notified when we're releasing new videos. Let's talk about property development and the 5 stages. I think there's 5 key stages that you really need to understand that I've learned, that I want to break down for you to help you with getting into property development. The first stage in property development is being able to find and appraise the opportunities. So this is where we're looking for the sites and being able to assess, is there really an opportunity to be able to develop and make some money from this site? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve. And I feel the best way to do that is to start with one of my favorite quotes, which is to start with the end in mind. So the end goal is for us to be able to develop something that we're going to be able to sell and exit out of, or maybe even develop and be keeping as a build to rent scheme. So we start with what's the property going to be worth, what's the site, the development going to be worth once it's finished, or what we call the gross development value, the GDV. So we start with that figure. Let's use some simple numbers. Let's say it's going to be £1 million. Once it's finished, you've converted, you've created whatever you're creating. Let's keep the number simple. Let's say it's 10 apartments that you're creating at £100,000 each. So that's £1 million in value. So then you look at how much profit it is that you want to keep out of that particular site for doing this project. What is it going to be worth for you to do? Now, sometimes people will compromise on this and say, well, I'm happy to go with a smaller profit. It's my first deal. I want to learn. And I would say to you, no, stop. Definitely don't do that. On my first deal, I wasn't looking for something where we could make maybe a smaller profit to learn on. I was looking for a deal where we can make a huge profit on, just so that if we are going to learn and we're going to make mistakes, we can absorb those mistakes and still come out the other end with a profit. Thinking about a 25 or 30% profit margin on the GDV would mean in our £1 million example, we're taking about £250,000. Let's say the 25% as your profit margin. This then leaves £750,000. The next step we need to do here is calculate what's it going to cost to build the site out. So we're going to make some assumptions here because we're doing some very high level calculations, and I want to just demonstrate the point. Let's say we're building 10 apartments. They're going to cost us £50,000 to build each one. So it's £500,000 is going to be the cost to develop out our project. So now what we've got is £1 million development site, £250,000 profit, £500,000 as our build cost, and then we've got left whatever we can pay for the site. But also we need to consider what's going to be the cost of our finance as well. There might be other things you need to take into consideration. For example, there may need to be work that needs to be done on the site and the land beforehand. There might be some reports that need to be put into place before you can start building. But just keeping it simple right now, what that would mean in this example is that we could pay, say, £250,000 for the land. So we're buying the land for £250,000, we're spending £500,000 developing the site, we're making £250,000 profit and selling for £1 million. That's generally how we would work the numbers out. And at a very high level, as I said, there's more things to think about, but this will get you an understanding of the basics of what we need to do when we calculate these numbers. Remember, when you're doing these calculations, it's really important to build some contingency as well. We tend to build in about 10 or 15% when we're looking at sites. So how do we actually go about finding these opportunities, finding these sites? Well, there's many different ways. For example, you could be searching online through normal platforms like Rightmove, Zoopla, where you're just looking for what's available for sale. Sometimes you find the commercial agents are selling more of the development type sites than maybe on your residential agents that might be selling those. Then of course there's auctions as well. You get things in auction. One of my favorite ways is to actually write direct to the owner of the property. That's identifying a site you might spot, and you think actually you send a letter directly to the owner, or you try and contact them directly and talk to them about whether they'd be open about selling their site. So what that does, it means that you're going straight to the person who hasn't necessarily got the property on the market, and it gives you an opportunity to have a conversation with them. Hopefully there's not lots of other people having a conversation with them as well. That's why it tends to be my most favorite way of doing it. And one of the ways we identify the sites is use tools like Nimbus Maps is what we use, which we think is a really great tool to help us identify the sites where we think there might be an opportunity. We do some high level calculations. Then of course, remember, we need to do the appraisals where we're calculating how something would pan out. Is it going to even work? Do the numbers stack? This is really what we need to be focusing on in the first stage. In the second stage, what we're doing is negotiating the site to be able to acquire it. Now, there's different ways we can structure acquiring a site. Now, a site might have planning permission, means you can take it on and ready to build it straight out for whatever the planning approval is already there, or it may be it's got no planning already on site and you're acquiring the site to be able to then take on planning. Personally, for me, taking the site on without planning is far too much risk. So I want the certainty, and that's really because I tend to work with investors and other investors and private cash. So I wanted the certainty of how we're going to exit out of that transaction. So there may be bigger developers that will take sites on with no planning permission. They'll absorb that risk. But really, when you're starting, you don't want to be taking on those risks. With the site, you can talk to the owner about putting a planning application in to be able to get what you want before you complete the transaction. So essentially, you're locking in a purchase where you agree to buy the site, the land, you go off to get planning. Once you've got the planning for what you need, then you come back to complete the purchase. And of course, people sometimes talk about planning gain, which is an uplift in value from the site, from what it was to what it might be. So if we go back to our early example of the £1 million site, when we had 250,000 for the land value, that was because it was ready to build out. If it wasn't ready to build out and it would just say, grazing land, for example, then it's worth very, very little in comparison. It's the ability to be able to build on it where the real value is added generally in these types of projects. So whether we are negotiating directly with the owner, whether we're buying through somebody else, an agent, an auction, we need to think about what risks are we potentially taking on to be able to get to the next stage of building. And when we're raising finance to be able to acquire the sites, that often the lenders will be more comfortable when it's ready to build, rather than sitting with you taking the risk of waiting for planning permission, because there is no guarantee that you'll actually get the planning permission that you need. Now, if you're thinking about how am I going to get the vendor to wait around for me to be able to go and get planning, it could take 2 months, it could take 6 months, it could take a year before you get planning to be able to build the site. And this is where you've got to take the time to understand what is it the vendor wants and what do they need. And often paying a little bit more means you can lock them into the deal. So what you're doing, you're agreeing to pay, let's say the site was worth £100,000, you might be agreeing to pay £150,000, but it's subject to you being able to get the relevant planning that you need, because you know it's worth, say, £250,000 to you once the planning permission is in place. So effectively at the end, you've got the site BMV, below market value, ready to build out. You can also partner with the owner of the site as well, bring them into the deal as a potential joint venture partner. For instance, their contribution into the deal might be the site or the land. It may even be that you can then borrow money against that if you're coming together in the project to raise the next stage of funds, which is the development finance. When it comes to acquiring a site, my preference is usually to use private finances, to use other investors' money and do a profit share on that, or just pay them a set price for a set amount for the money that they're putting into the project. The other advantage using private investor money is generally you can get deals done a lot quicker, and this is why it's my preference. And in fact, if you would like to get involved with me and work with me in terms of a funding capacity, you've got funds to invest, reach out to me and we can have a chat about that. Other ways you can raise money for your deals would be bridging finance, for instance, or development finance or crowdfunding, and all of these I've used on my various projects. Let's assume you've now acquired the site or taken control of it. The next step and the third stage is to think about how you can add value to what you already have. Now, if you're taking on a site with no planning permission, then really this is where you're adding the value by going out to get planning permission on that particular site. You need a team of good people around you, planning consultants, architects, possibly surveyors, quantity surveyors. It's about having the right people, the right expert knowledge to be able to do that. With planning really is a part of law. It's about understanding that really well. Now, you're probably not going to become an expert in planning, but it's really important to understand about generally what the local authorities' views are in terms of developing, because each of the boroughs are different in terms of what they want to see happen within their particular areas. On the other hand, if you have a site that already has planning approval on it, then what we're looking to do at this stage is how can we tweak that? How can we make that better? So if we go back to our earlier example of the 10 apartments that we were looking at, is it possible for you to maybe change that 10 to 11? Could you get another floor on top? Could you, for example, get a penthouse suite or something on the top of that building, which means you've now increased the number of units, hence increased the value? This is what we mean about value add. Where can you tweak how that's going to be done? And of course, some of it is looking at the costings as well, of how you might be able to tweak either the design or the build to be able to reduce your costs as well, and ultimately these things to lead to more profit on the project. This is essentially the value add bit. The fourth stage is the actual build itself. You had the vision of what you wanted to see, now it's time to build it. Now, one of the ways you could do that is to be able to manage all the different trades involved, your electricians, plumbers, brickwork, grounds people, everybody is involved, and just manage all that yourself. However, unless you're very experienced, I would suggest that's probably not the best place to start. What my preference has been is to use a design and build contract and then a contractor that can deliver that. What does that actually mean? So a design and build contract is one where we put all the specification, everything together in terms of what's required for us, what is it that we want as a client from that particular site. Then we hand the whole thing to a builder for them to build it out, and their responsibility is pretty much all shifted over to them until the keys are handed back over to us as the finished project. Now, we can still be involved and see what's going on, but we're no longer interfering and directing. We're essentially just leaving them to deliver what it is that they're going to do. And that's been my preference, because what it means is you take the risk away. Now, when the risk moves, it means the person taking on the risk, i.e. the builder, they will probably increase their price slightly to be able to absorb and manage the risk from their side. But hey, they're more experienced, so it's a lower risk for them than it is for me. So yes, you might pay a little bit more, but ultimately what it means is that you'll get a much more risk-free project, particularly at the early stages when you're starting to do this. Once you've got more experience, you can start managing the different sites, different trades yourself to be able to deliver the project. The fifth and final part of this process is to be able to exit out of the transaction. So when you come to complete and sell, you need to make sure you've got your estate agents ready, that have got the property marketing. So when are we going to start marketing the property to sell? Once it's all finished and staged and looking great? No, we want to start at the very early stage. We want to start generating some interest in the site. What we want to do, we want to create some CGI, some computer generated imagery around what the property is going to look like. Now, there's some great people around that can actually create these for you, so you can get a visual of what's the finished product going to look like, and based on that, your agent can start marketing the property, start generating interest, and then that way you can get some early commitment. So by the time you finish site, ideally you want to have sold, if not all of them, at least a fair few of the properties, so that you're in a much more comfortable position. Now, alternative, if you're going to be looking to keep the property at the end, you're doing what we call a build to rent scheme, where you're not actually going to sell the site at the end, but you intend to keep it and have tenants there. Then you want to make sure you've got things ready for your remortgage process, your refinance process to happen at the end, so that whatever method you've used to acquire it funding wise, whether it's bridger, development finance, crowdfunding, whatever it is, that can be paid off and your long-term mortgage product is ready to go onto that particular site, and then your tenants can move in straight away. So the exit, really the key thing is be planning early and not wait till you get to the end to start thinking about the exit. These are the 5 stages of property development, all the way from finding the site at the beginning, getting all the way to the end, from exiting out of that particular transaction. Now, if you want to learn more about any specifics, because really I've just glossed over and it's such a deep topic, there's so many different things that we can talk about, make sure you put it in the comment section below, because if there's enough interest on anything particular, I'll do another video for you in much more detail. And of course, if you're enjoying this content, make sure you smash that like button as well, subscribe to the channel, and enable the notification bell so you're notified when we're releasing videos just like this. Just leaving to say thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.